What's up guys? As you can see, my mower's got a smoking problem. That's gotta stop today. Now the mower we're going to be working on today is this Husqvarna YTH20K46. Now this mower does have 497 hours on it, and this thing has the Kohler Courage 20 engine in it. Now these things are known for being the most reliable engines in the world. I'm just kidding. These things actually have a terrible reputation. I clearly have some issues, but the very first thing I need to do is get the oil out of this engine, and while that's draining, I'll go over the issues that I think are wrong. While that oil is draining, I'm just going to remove this engine cover. There are just 4 bolts holding that on. Now the issues with these Kohler motors is the valve cover gaskets are this cork material, and they sit right above the exhaust, so that heat just degrades that material to the point where it fails and you have oil leaking down onto the exhaust. Now that is what's causing this mower to smoke. So we're definitely going to have to replace that gasket. Now another issue is this engine cover sits on top of the engine and it's held on by all these bolts. Well, on just about every single one of these mowers, these bolts end up working themselves loose to the point where you can loosen them by hand. And these ones here are a pretty big issue because once they work themselves loose, they'll catch this flywheel and it'll shear that bolt off, and it puts enough pressure on that block where it actually cracks it. Now I took this cover off last weekend so I could order some parts and see exactly what was wrong with this engine, and I noticed that 6 of these bolts I was able to loosen up by hand, so that is not good. And now the biggest issue. You can see the block is cracked. I'll clean that up for you a little bit. So now you can see it pretty good. This block is cracked the whole way down here, so I'm gonna have to find a way to fix this. All right, let's start tearing this thing down and see what we're working with. So I'm gonna start by removing this valve cover here. Once I get that off, we'll start working on that engine cover. A little bit of sludge in the bottom of this. I'm hoping the entire engine doesn't look like that. So normally you'd want to clean all this up before you take this cover off. I'm not too worried about it. I'm not too worried about this mower. It has a cracked block, so we're just going to do a repair and run it as long as possible until it blows out. Once it blows out, get a new mower. So next up, we can remove this fan and remove the flywheel. And on this fan there is a metal washer, so don't lose that. And then there's also a washer on this bolt. So I'm going to be taking that washer out, putting that bolt back in there, and I'm going to be whacking this bolt to remove this flywheel. Now this coil is going to be in the way, so I'm going to get this removed. So to remove this flywheel, I'm going to take a pry bar and I'm going to be prying up on it, and at the same time I'm going to take a hammer and smack this bolt. That should release it. Now the proper way to do this is with a flywheel remover, but we don't got that, so this is what we're doing. One good smack with the hammer, got that off. And there is a key in here, so don't lose that. Now I'm going to remove this bracket here, and then I'm also going to remove the starter. We'll remove the stator or alternator, whatever you want to call it. It looks like these 2 wires here just have to go through this hole in the engine cover for some reason. So they plug into this plug, so I'm going to unplug this and see if I can't get these wires out of this housing. That way I'll be able to pull them out and we'll be able to get this cover off. So I already removed one of these wires so you can see it, but on the inside here, there are these 2 little barbs, and that's what's actually holding this wire, this little metal piece, into this housing. So in order to get that out, I'm just using a very small flathead screwdriver, and I'm sticking it in this end here, and I'm just pushing on those barbs as I'm pulling on that wire. Now that can be a little finicky, but they will come out eventually. Just a couple more things. I'm going to remove this dipstick and also our housing here. That's going to have to be removed because that does interfere with this cover. And if you're like me and you dropped your nut in your oil pan, make sure you fish that out and get all that oil off of it. I just don't understand why bad things happen to good people. And to keep myself from making too big of a mess, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this oil filter. And now we can remove all these engine cover bolts. I imagine the 1/2-inch impact on some chrome sockets will get the job done just fine. Now all these bolts are exactly the same size. The only thing to take note of is this guy over here has this little wiring harness bracket. So I'm just gonna take a paint marker and mark that so I remember where that goes. And using a rubber mallet, I'm just gonna tap on the bottom of this cover to break it free. Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this cam here. This is the exhaust cam, and then you got your intake cam over here. They are both labeled. And now these rods, if I go to pull this gear out, this will come out as well. So as I pull it out, I'm gonna be pushing down on this rod. If it does come out, you can always stick it back in there, but it's just easier if you push down on it. Now another thing you need to take note of is there's 2 dots on here. You got a dot on this gear and a dot on this gear. You gotta line those up. So we're gonna line those up before we pull this out. Once they're lined up, we can pull it out, and that way we know exactly where it needs to go when we put it back in. I'm gonna take this turkey baster here and try to get all the oil out of the bottom of that pan. That way when we put this new gasket on and we put new oil in it, we're just starting fresh and everything's good to go. And any gunk we have in that oil will be out. We got all that old oil out and it actually looked pretty good in there for as dirty as it was. So now I'm gonna go ahead and remove this gasket material from the block using a razor. And you know, for a dumpy old engine, she sure does clean up all right, I guess. And I would just like to thank this Jarvis Clark here for signing the inside of this thing. Pretty neat. So now that I got that gasket all cleaned up there and I cleaned out the inside, all the little bits and pieces that fell in there, I gotta do the exact same thing for the cover. I got that surface cleaned up. That surface is pretty cleaned up. Still got to clean that part. We'll deal with that later. But I think I'm finally ready to start working on this crack. Now, I've seen people repair this in 3 different ways. I've seen people just slap some JB Weld on there and hope it holds. I've also seen people use a C-clamp, and I just so happened to went out and bought a C-clamp. And what they'll do is they'll clamp these 2 pieces together, and that'll just help hold this together. And then I've also seen people take a tap and drill, and they'll drill through here, they'll drill through a spot here, and they'll cut out a little plate and they'll bolt that plate in. So what am I gonna do? Well, I want this thing to last, so I'm gonna do all 3 of those methods. I'm gonna drill a hole in there, I'm gonna slap some JB Weld, I'm gonna mount this plate, throw some screws in it to help hold it, and then to top it off, I'm gonna throw this clamp on it. If that doesn't work, I don't know what will. It's definitely a redneck fix, but it beats buying a whole new motor, and I will never buy another one of these motors, so that's what we're doing. It ain't stupid if it works, and I'm hoping it works. If it don't work, then it's just stupid, and we'll just trash this whole thing. I'm gonna start things off by getting this plate cut down to size. Not gonna lie, this fits on here pretty good. And that curve is just perfect, keeps it from rocking around. So now we can go ahead and drill 2 holes in the plate. Alrighty, and there we have it. I don't know if that's going to make it any stronger, but I think in combination with all that JB Weld, I think this will be very strong. Now, if you're wondering what I used to drill out that plate, I drilled 2 1/4-inch holes through the plate. I used a number 7 bit to drill through the block, and then I used a 1/4-20 tap to tap those holes, and then these are just 1/4-20 bolts. I'm going to remove this plate and prep this whole thing for JB Weld. I'm going to sand both the plate and the block inside and out, and then I also plan on cutting a groove into that crack, and hopefully that'll give that JB Weld something to seep into and make that a little stronger. And here's a look at the outside, and I do believe cutting that groove and that crack is a good thing to do, because this crack isn't structural, so it's not actually going to support anything. But I'm thinking that we got some of the oil out of that groove, so hopefully that JB Weld will stick in there and it'll seal that up. So you can see I chased it the whole way down to the bottom here. And on the inside I did the same exact thing, grooved out the crack and sanded around it. The last thing I need to do before we JB Weld everything is cut these bolts down. They were sticking out pretty far. That's definitely going to hit that cam. So I'm going to cut these down so they sit somewhat flush. And then when I do apply that JB Weld on the inside, I'm gonna have to be sure not to build it up too much because it's gonna interfere with that cam gear. I do have some room, but I just can't go wild. The outside, I can build it up as much as I want, really. All right, bolts are cut down. I just guessed on the length. I think they'll be good. And then I also sanded down this bracket and sprayed it with some pre-paint prep. That way all the oil's off of it. I think we're ready to go. I'm gonna mix up the JB Weld. On the inside, I'm gonna try to build it up and smooth it out real nice. And then on the outside, I'm just gonna glob it in here, put that bracket on, and then just keep globbing it over top. This is gonna be permanent, so hopefully I will never have to look at this ever again. Definitely not the prettiest thing, but hey, if it holds that oil in and keeps that block together, that's all I really care about. And here's a look of the inside. And I went ahead and threw this clamp on so you can see that oil start to ooze out of that crack, so I know that that is pulled in tight, and hopefully that JB Weld is gonna hold it in this position. Now this clamp is just gonna become a permanent part of this mower, but we'll take this off and we'll find a better solution to put this on in the morning. But for now, I'm just gonna let this thing cure overnight and see what it looks like in the morning. Alrighty guys, so this thing has actually been this way for a week, so this JB Weld has had plenty of time to dry. Now I'm gonna be removing this clamp, and then I'll probably knock down some of these high spots in here. I got a couple little sharp spots. I'm just gonna sand those down real quick, and then I'm gonna modify this clamp by cutting it shorter, because this will become a permanent part of the mower. So I don't want this handle sticking out as far, so I'm just gonna cut it, and that'll just shorten that handle and put it closer to the engine. So let's get that done. Here we are, here's what it looks like. But there's the inside. I just took off some of those high spots, cleaned everything up. You can see down in there all the shavings, everything's cleaned up. So we're ready to start assembling this thing. Now I got a new gasket. Here's the part number if you want to purchase that. Now I will be throwing a link in the description of everything I use in this video. But let's get these cams back into the engine. Keeping everything the exact way we pulled it out. This one with the washer goes on the exhaust side, and you have that EX with the dot on it. So this is gonna go on the exhaust side of the motor, and the exhaust side of the motor is the one with the exhaust on it. Now the intake side is the one with the carburetor on it. Now you do need to push that paddle forward, and we can go ahead and put this cam on this shaft. Just work that on real nice. You may have to twist that shaft a little just to get that pin to line up and lock into that cam. And be 100% sure this exhaust dot lines up here, and then your intake dot lines up there. And that cover is a little bit dirty, so I'm gonna get that cleaned up. Then I can put the gasket onto the mower and put the cover on top of all that. Now my engine cover went on real smoothly, but you may just have to kind of tap this down real lightly and twist this and get everything moving in there to get that to mesh. Now this is in, I'm gonna go ahead and twist that to make sure that we're good to go. Then I'm gonna blow out all these holes. That way if there's any debris or oil in them, it'll get that out. I'm gonna clean up the bolts, they're down there. And then I'm gonna blue Loctite them, and I'm gonna torque them in a star pattern. Now reinstall this stator, and this wire just runs right up here underneath this metal clip, so we'll just have to bend that back down. Now I'm going to install our air filter housing, and now this throttle bracket can go back on. And the key is to put the bolts in the exact same spot that came off, so you can see the wear marks where the bolts used to sit. Now if you slide this forward or slide it back, it's going to change your idle speed. So just make sure you're getting these bolts in the exact same spot you took it off in. Now coming over to the exhaust side of the engine, we can go ahead and run these wires again. Now they just ran through this clip here, and then down this first slot, feed those in. So now we're ready to reattach our wires, and if you have the plugs so that the orange wire and the purple wire are on top, we're gonna be inserting the white wire underneath the purple wire, and the red wire goes underneath that white wire. And we can plug that back in. Now we're gonna reinstall the starter, and there's just 2 nuts on this. Now these studs aren't massive, so don't over torque them. Now I pulled the coil out of the way. I'm gonna be installing the flywheel, but first I'm gonna clean it up and you can see how much dirt and grass is in that, so I'm gonna clean that up. Just using compressed air, you can see how nicely the inside of that cleaned up. So to put this on, don't forget you have a key in here, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the little slot. Just make sure that that key doesn't fall out when you place the flywheel on. So now we're going to install the fan. Now there are 2 pins on the back of this that lock it into the flywheel. There's 2 holes on the flywheel, so make sure that's lined up. And then there's also this cutout in this fan, and now that's just giving you room for the magnet. So make sure that's lined up properly. You'll feel that drop into place. Next we have this big flat washer. Now there are 4 tabs that lock it in, and then you also want this to be like a bowl. Then we have our fat washer here. You can see this wear mark, so this is gonna be on the top, and then this flat part here is gonna be on the bottom. And then we have our bolt. Now you do wanna tighten this down pretty good, so I'm gonna go to about 15 nugget-duggas. That should be good. So we're ready to install the coil. Now the circle wear marks go on top, and then these shapes match these shapes, so you know that this end goes down. We're gonna spin the flywheel till the magnet lines up with this coil, and we'll go ahead and put it on and get these bolts started. Now I left these bolts on the coil loose, and I'm gonna pull this back, and I'm gonna be placing this 10/1000 or 0.25 millimeter feeler gauge in between it and the magnets. And the magnet will suck that in, and I'm just gonna apply a little bit of pressure and tighten these bolts down. Can spin the flywheel to get this feeler gauge out of here. Now I went ahead and taped up this wire. It did get caught in the flywheel, and then I threw this Husqvarna orange zip tie over here just to help hold that away. Now the only other things I'm gonna do is put that little fan cover on, put the dipstick in just to keep the engine clean, keep anything from falling down in there. Then I'm gonna put the air filter back on. Once that's done, then we'll start working on this valve cover. So I'm moving right along. The last thing I gotta do is put this valve cover gasket on, which is supposed to come in tomorrow. Good thing, because my grass is getting pretty high. And while I got all this opened up, I'm gonna check the valve clearances, but all that's gonna happen tomorrow. So I'll see you in the morning. All right, so I finally got this valve cover gasket in. There's the part number there. So we should be able to get this mower up and running today. We'll see. Now, like I said, since I got this valve cover off already, I'm gonna go ahead and check the valve lash on these valves. So I'm gonna remove this spark plug, and that way I'll be able to tell when that engine is top dead center very easily. Now in order to get this thing top dead center, I got my screwdriver in here. I want it to be all the way out. And another thing I need to look for is I want to adjust these valves on the compression stroke. So when this engine's at the top, I don't want the valves to be moving. Now, if I spin this around to top dead center here, we can see that the valves are still moving, so that's not going to give us a very good measurement. So we're just going to spin this around till this piston comes out one more time. And now we can see we can kind of play around with it a little bit, and these valves aren't moving, so this is where they need to be adjusted. Now the valve lash on the intake side should be adjusted to 0.005, that's 5 thousandths. So we're just going to stick this in between the valve and the rocker arm, and we want this to start binding up so we can see that that's pretty loose. You still want to be able to slide this, but you want it to be pretty tight. Right now we got a lot of wiggle room in there. So to adjust this, you have a T15 lock nut on the inside, so we're going to back that off. And then we can hold this nut, and then this nut here will just start tightening until we feel it start to bind up on that feeler gauge. So right here, it's pretty snug in that feeler gauge. I'm starting to feel some resistance, so that's where I'm going to be tightening it up. Go ahead and lock that back in, and then we'll just check this one last time. and we are good to go. We're now gonna do the exact same thing on the exhaust side, and this gets adjusted to 7 thousandths. All that's good to go, so I'm gonna put the spark plug back into the head, and then I'm gonna get this valve cover all cleaned up and ready to be reinstalled. All right, got my cover cleaned up. Now this is 2 pieces, so I took this apart and there's a little sponge behind there. So I cleaned all that up, put it back together, and then I cleaned up that outer surface here where it's gonna seal. I am gonna use the original gasket, but I'm gonna cover it in this high temperature gasket maker. Now this is just a cork gasket, so they're known for failing, and I'm hoping that that gasket maker will help. So I tightened down these bolts extremely loosely, just enough to get that gasket maker kind of squeezed in there. Now I'm gonna wait an hour, and then I'm gonna come back and torque these down. Now it's been an hour, I'm gonna torque these down, and if you're into torque specs, these get torqued down to 95 inch-pound. And of course, we're gonna torque them in a star pattern. With everything torqued down, we can put our cover back onto the mower. Now I did have to trim this little piece in here, and then I also had to trim a little part of this because they interfere with the clamp. Probably a pretty important step. I'll put the new oil filter on and fill this thing with oil. Well, there you have it, guys. No surprise, this thing fired right up. Now, there's one last thing I want to do to help preserve this and keep it running as long as possible. There used to be this plate down here, and that protected the muffler. Well, I think it was supposed to. It obviously didn't work. So this is just scrap metal now. Now I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to drill 2 holes in it, and I'm going to be bolting it right in here where that muffler bolts down. And that way, it'll just act as a heat shield and hopefully protect the gasket that's up in here as long as possible. Now, is anything I did pretty? Absolutely not. But who knows? I might get another 5 minutes on this engine, maybe another 100 hours on it, maybe another 500 hours on it. Now, that would be the goal. At least it's not leaking a ton of oil yet. So we'll just have to see how long it lasts, and we'll go from there. But thank you guys for watching. Hit that like and subscribe button. I got some grass to mow.